The first interpellation session under the Lee Jae-myung administration has wrapped up at the National Assembly with lawmakers clashing over a host of state affairs for a fourth and final day. We have a full review of the session and what is up next for the Assembly. The U.S. Federal Reserve has made its first rate cut in U.S. President Donald Trump's second term. A quarter of a percentage point reduction, but this is just the beginning. We break it down in the studio later. It's the second day of the Busan International Film Festival, and our reporter covering the event shows us the highlights. Good evening and thank you for joining us on this Thursday evening. I'm Kim Do-yeon filling in for Kim Dami. We begin at the National Assembly where 4 days of questioning on government policies ended with the rival parties pressing on a variety of issues. Our Moon Hae-ryun starts us off.
The National Assembly wrapped up its first interpellation session under the Lee Jae-myung administration on Thursday, this time focusing on culture, society and education. The final day of the 4-day questioning period saw the main opposition People Power Party bring a range of issues to the table, including the suitability of the education minister's appointment to office and the Democratic Party's push for broadcast reform. DP lawmakers, however, focused their attention on the need to ease the competitive environment in South Korean education and the country's low birth rate. Heated debate ensued as lawmakers continued to clash over judicial and prosecutorial reforms that clouded the interpellation from day one. The PPP attacked the DP's calls for Chief Justice Cho Lee-dae to step down and a proposal to increase the number of Supreme Court justices, calling it the administration's attempt to control the judiciary.
All of these actions that undermine the fairness of trials and encroach on judicial authority are unconstitutional measures that shake the very foundation of the liberal democratic order.
Prime Minister Kim Min-seok dismissed the claims, stressing that the debate should not be reduced to political timing or appointments.
The fundamental issue with increasing the number of Supreme Court justices is not who can appoint them and at what time. When we create a system, we do so on the premise that governments will change.
But with the regular session still underway, the partisan divide is far from over, with more contentious issues set to surface in the weeks ahead. The National Assembly's audit of government ministries and agencies is scheduled to start on October 13, where lawmakers will hold the government accountable for its performance across all areas: policy, spending, administration, and public impact. Another big task that lawmakers will have to tackle together in the months to come will be the 2026 budget, as well as other key reform bills scheduled for deliberation. Moon Hae-ryun, Arirang News.
President Lee Jae-myung says South Korea's future depends on solving the challenges facing young people such as housing and jobs. At a weekly meeting with his top aides on Thursday, the president pledged that his administration will be a reliable government that eases burdens and restores hope for younger generations.
중요한 것은 청년의 문제의식과 관점이 청년 정책에 온전하게 반영돼야 된다는 것입니다. 청년들은 대한민국의 주역이자 또 회복과 성장의 원동력이기도 합니다.
Before the meeting, President Lee appointed 2 assistant secretaries for youth affairs, newly created posts in charge of developing and improving policies for young people. Now, President Lee Jae-myung also says South Korea will stand together with the U.S. while at the same time acknowledging the need to manage its relationship with China. In an interview with an American news magazine, he stated Seoul can act as a bridge between the rivals. Our presidential office correspondent Yoon Jung-min reports.
South Korea will stand together with the U.S. while managing its relationship with China. That's according to South Korean President Lee Jae-myung in an interview with Time released on Thursday, saying Korea's values of democracy and market economy are based on its alliance with the U.S., but taking into account its geographical proximity and economic ties with China, it cannot sever its relationship with Beijing. He noted that South Korea can instead act as a bridge between the rival superpowers at a time of intense rivalry. In fact, U.S. President Donald Trump and Chinese President Xi Jinping are expected to meet in South Korea's Gyeongju next month in time for the APEC leaders meeting. The multilateral meeting comes at a complicated time when Washington is imposing sweeping tariffs against the world, against which Beijing is expected to call for an international order that it perceives as fair and just.
Probably APEC is the very good place to South Korea can have some kind of a role to play to bringing these two great powers together. But if that wouldn't be, United States and China could not come up with any kind of agreement of the trade war, and then it's very limited.
On North Korea, President Lee reaffirmed his goal to negotiate with the regime to dissuade it from pursuing its nuclear ambition, hoping to find a middle ground instead of an all-or-nothing approach. For that, he suggested halting their nuclear and missile programs as a short-term goal, followed by compensation, disarmament, and complete denuclearization as long-term goals. Yoon Jung-min, Arirang News.
Acting U.S. ambassador to South Korea, Joseph Yoon, says U.S. President Donald Trump will attend the APEC leaders meeting in Gyeongju next month and hold talks with President Lee Jae-myung. Speaking at the Korea-U.S. Alliance Conference in Seoul on Wednesday, Yoon said last month's summit between the two leaders was a success and confirmed they will meet again at APEC. He emphasized that the alliance remains strong and is growing stronger. He also added that the partnership is focused not only on the Korean Peninsula, but also on global peace, prosperity, and security, stressing ongoing efforts to modernize the alliance. Now, after hundreds of South Koreans were detained in a U.S. immigration raid in Georgia, an official at an economic development organization in the state says discussions are underway to bring back those workers. A new report from the Congressional Research Service also warns that the incident could strain Seoul-Washington relations. Lee Seung-jae reports.
An official from a public economic development organization in the U.S. state of Georgia says discussions are underway to bring back South Korean workers who were detained in a U.S. immigration raid earlier this month. Hugh Tollison, president of the Savannah Economic Development Authority, told the Savannah Morning News on Wednesday that it's very important for the workers to return. He explained that they are the only people with the technical skills to install equipment and train employees in battery cell technology at Hyundai Motor Group's joint battery plant with LG Energy Solution. Tollison did not provide details on how the workers' return might be secured. Meanwhile, a new report from the Congressional Research Service warned that the incident could strain U.S.-South Korea relations. The report noted concerns that immigration enforcement could conflict with U.S. efforts to expand domestic manufacturing through foreign investment. It also referenced pending legislation known as the Partner with Korea Act. The bipartisan bill would provide 15,000 high-skilled visas for Korean nationals, helping to fill gaps in advanced industries like electric vehicles and batteries. Meanwhile, LG Energy Solution says its U.S. battery projects remain on track despite the recent incident. According to the Wall Street Journal, Lee Hyuk-jae, the head of the company's North America division, told reporters at an auto industry event in Detroit that LG is working very hard at all sites to ensure customers are not affected. LG Energy Solution is currently building 4 battery plants in the U.S., including the joint venture with Hyundai in Georgia. More than 310 South Koreans were arrested on September 4th at the Hyundai LG plant construction site in Georgia. U.S. immigration officials say they were working illegally, some on short-term or recreational visas that do not allow employment. They were detained for about a week before being released and returned to South Korea. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
After some time of push and pull with U.S. President Donald Trump, the U.S. Central Bank cut its key interest rate by a 0.25 percentage point. This is the first cut of President Trump's second administration, and it looks like there are more to come. Our Kim Bo-kyung reports.
U.S. Federal Reserve has cut its benchmark rate by 0.25 percentage points. With the cut, the rate now stands between 4% and 4.25%. The decision on Wednesday local time marks the first rate cut for this year and the first since the Trump administration took office in January, as the Fed had held the rate steady since last December's cut. Speaking to journalists, Fed Chair Jerome Powell said the balance of risks has shifted as the downside risk of unemployment has increased.
While the unemployment rate remains low, it has edged up. Job gains have slowed, and downside risks to employment have risen. At the same time, inflation has risen recently and remains somewhat elevated.
In a press release, the central bank also mentioned a somewhat elevated inflation risk due to tariffs, though Powell said the effects of the tariffs on economic activity and inflation are yet to be seen.
Higher tariffs have begun to push up prices in some categories of goods, but their overall effects on economic activity and inflation remain to be seen. A reasonable base case is that the effects on inflation will be relatively short-lived.
One of the Fed governors, Stephen Myron, who was appointed by President Trump and only took office the day before the decision, actually voted for a bigger interest rate cut of 0.5 percentage points. According to the Fed's latest dot plot, which shows policymakers' interest rate projections, there could be 2 additional rate cuts this year in upcoming FOMC meetings in October and December. As a result of this September rate cut, the interest rate differential between Seoul and Washington has narrowed to 1.75 percentage points, with South Korea's rate being at 2.5%. Kim Bo-kyung, Arirang News.
For the first time since December last year, the U.S. Federal Reserve decided to lower the country's benchmark interest rate by 25 basis points. We have our economics correspondent Park Jun-han here in the studio to explain how the U.S. Fed's decision could impact global economies, including South Korea. Welcome, Jun-han.
Great to be back, Doyeon.
So, Jun-han, just a day after U.S. announced its interest rate cut, stock markets in South Korea and Japan hit record highs. What's the driving factor for this?
That's right, Doyeon. So global stocks either rebounded or set new record highs following the Fed's plan for long-term interest rate cuts. U.S. stock indexes such as the S&P 500 and Nasdaq dipped slightly on Wednesday ahead of the interest rate decision, but recovered most of their losses after the announcement. Asian stocks rose to an all-time highs the following day as investors viewed the Fed's stance positively, with expectations outweighing concerns over an economic slowdown. South Korea's Kospi gained 1.4% to break another high at over 3,460 points, led by semiconductor stocks. Japan's Nikkei 225 also claimed another record as it climbed to over 45,300 at the market's close, boosted by export-related shares' strong performances. A professor of business explained that the rise in Asian stocks was driven by funds previously concentrated in the U.S. due to high interest rates, shifting to countries like Korea and Japan with relatively lower rates. Let's take a listen.
The likelihood of capital flowing into South Korea has increased as funds that were previously concentrated in the U.S. shift direction. From Korea's perspective, this should now provide a boost in stock prices. Furthermore, if the U.S. continues to lower interest rates to stimulate its economy, Korea should recognize that this could also improve exports, not just in terms of capital flows, but in the flow of physical goods.
So, the world's largest economy, the U.S., has declared it will enter a rate-cutting cycle. How might this action influence the policy direction of the global economy? Can South Korea benefit from this?
That's right, Doyeon. So U.S. monetary policy significantly affects not only its own economy, but also those of other countries. The day the U.S. Federal Reserve announced the rate cut, it also proposed its long-term median federal funds target. The Fed indicated a median federal funds rate of 3.6% for the end of this year, suggesting 2 additional rate cuts are likely at the October and December Federal Open Market Committee meetings. Policymakers then projected a median interest rate of 3.4% at the end of 2026 and a long-term target rate to stay at around 3%. As a result of this September rate cut, the interest rate differential between South Korea and the U.S. has narrowed to 1.75 percentage points, with South Korea's rate being at 2.5%. The business professor noted that changes in U.S. monetary policy are likely to boost liquidity in the South Korean market, potentially benefiting it as more funds from the U.S. flow into South Korea. Let's take a listen to what Professor Kim had to say about this.
If lowering interest rates strengthens the U.S. economy, global liquidity is likely to improve. As U.S. rates decline and the interest rate gap with South Korea narrows, South Korea's financial market, and the same applies to Europe, becomes more attractive to investors. While overall liquidity may remain stable, the portion previously concentrated in the U.S. could shift toward other markets, potentially boosting overseas investment.
Now, my last question for you, Junon. I'm curious how South Korea's central bank and government agencies responded to, last night's bench interest rate cut. What stance should the South Korean economy take after this?
Right. So following the interest rate decision, South Korean government agencies said that they would plan appropriate fiscal promises. So an economics professor noted that the U.S. Fed's rate cuts have given South Korea's central bank and government greater flexibility to pursue fiscal policies. Let's take a listen.
I understood it to mean that the South Korean government was concerned because U.S. interest rates remained relatively higher than South Korea's, and the U.S. had not yet resumed its rate-cutting cycle. Now that South Korea has more room to focus on domestic rate cuts, this is highly beneficial for the administration, the Ministry of Economy and Finance, and other related agencies. Even if South Korea lowers its rates, there is a lesser risk of capital outflows, since both countries' rates are still low.
An official from the Bank of Korea stated that due to the U.S. Fed's first rate cut in 9 months, it has become easier for it to operate monetary policy with a focus on domestic economic conditions, inflation, and financial stability. Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Economy and Finance Koo Yoon-chul noted at a macro-financial meeting that global markets reacted largely in line with expectations to the Fed's rate cut, though sentiment was mixed as investors weighed the U.S. Fed chairman's remarks on lingering uncertainties. Koo also stressed that the ministry will closely monitor risks, respond swiftly if needed, and maintain constant communication with relevant agencies to ensure stability in the economy and financial markets.
All right, thank you for that coverage.
Thank you, Doya. I hope to see you again soon.
Gangneung, which has been struggling with a severe drought for over a month, welcomed heavy rain that fell under a weather warning. While not enough to fully ease the drought, reservoir levels are expected to climb for now. Our Choi Soo-hyung reports.
Torrential downpours are making it almost impossible to see ahead, with excessive rain flooding some roads in Gangneung. The city in the eastern part of South Korea has been struggling with a severe drought for over a month.
It feels so overwhelming. I never realized how moving it could be to see so much rain in Gangneung.
Water levels in the Obong Reservoir, which supplies over 80% of Gangneung's household water, had dropped to just 11% last Thursday, causing the most severe drought in years. However, heavy rain that started over the weekend raised water levels by more than 23% this Thursday. In the region, a heavy rain warning was issued as downpours reached around 30 millimeters per hour. Water supply vehicles took a day off thanks to the rainfall after more than 15 days of delivering supplies.
I hope that water levels will keep rising and finally ease the water shortage in Gangneung.
So far, the water level at the Obong Reservoir has been rising for 5 straight days. Though it is still only about a quarter of the normal level, more rain upstream is expected to flow in, which should push levels higher. Choi Soo-hyung, Arirang News.
Now on the cultural front, the southern port city of Busan continues to draw visitors from around the world for this year's Busan International Film Festival with several global collaborative films with Korean movie makers. Our culture correspondent Park Gun-woo gives us a glimpse.
Made with Korea. Among hundreds of films premiering in Busan, it's easy to see how deeply Korean movie makers are involved. Not only in homegrown productions, but also through collaborations that cross borders. One standout is The Protector, the first ever Hollywood film led by a Korean production company. Premiering in Busan for the first time, the filmmakers shared their excitement about being part of such a groundbreaking project.
We're just scratching the surface of how Korean and American Hollywood productions can be made together, really work together to kind of condense the script and really get to the core, the essence of it that could really affect people on a worldwide level.
In the past few years, Korean content has become very big outside of Korea. Being able to create this story, it's an honest piece of work, and that translates to any culture.
Another buzzworthy project is Hana Korea, which depicts a North Korean defector's life through a Northern European director's perspective. The scenario was assisted by Sharon Choi, director Bong Joon-ho's translator during his Oscar win, and performed by Korean actors to deliver authenticity. The Busan International Film Festival is alive with movie fans from around the world, and they're expected to keep coming over the next few days. What are they expecting to see? Definitely more of these collaborative films, the ones made with Korea, from Hollywood to Europe.
Good for cultural exchange and learning from each other, also in the art of movie making, can be very beneficial too.
I really like different perspectives. It feels a bit more emotional. Just watching films in languages I don't really understand feels like I am appreciating the acting.
Likewise, the Japanese hit Kokuho that surpassed 10 million viewers in Japan, the first case a Korean director has achieved such a record, and the remake of The Wedding Banquet by a Korean-American director, featuring renowned Korean actor Yoon Yo-jung, also premieres throughout the festival. With many of these intriguing collaborative projects being showcased in Busan, why not try taking this cinematic journey beyond borders, made with Korea? Park Gun-woo, Arirang News, Busan.
From today, autumn is here with a cool breeze across the country. The daytime temperature in Seoul rose to only 26 degrees Celsius, similar to the average temperature for this time of year. Tomorrow, it will be even cooler with the daily high in Seoul dropping to 23 degrees. Rain will continue all over the country tomorrow. It will start raining in the western parts of the country in the afternoon and spread across the country at night. In particular, heavy rain of around 30 millimeters per hour is expected along the west coast around dawn on Saturday. Rain will mostly stop later on Saturday morning. Tomorrow morning will start chilly at below 20 degrees in most parts of the country. Daily highs will move up to 24 degrees in Daejeon, 25 degrees in Daegu and Gyeongju. Early autumn weather will continue throughout the rest of this week. Please dress in layers. That's all for Korea. Here are the weather conditions around the world.
That is Newscenter for tonight. For all of us here at Arirang, thanks for watching, and we hope you join us again tomorrow.